What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Oleta Adams, and we're returning to the 1993 album Evolution for the title track. Now, I noticed there's another non-album track in here called Embraceable You, and I have the folder organized by metadata track number, so I'm jumping over that, but once I finish going through the album proper, I'll jump back and react to that tune. In any case, thank you again to Kim for providing the Oleta material. And yes, Evolution, I imagine we're talking less natural selection or artificial selection and more about change over time, adaptation as it relates to a set of circumstances, and given the essence of many of her songs I've heard so far, I'm guessing that might relate to a romantic relationship, at the very least interpersonal, emotional connection or contact, and how that might require someone to become something they were not before, or at the very least adapt to circumstances to which they are not familiar or used to. So let's see what I can pick up on a first listen and try to see what it's about in practice. This is Evolution from the album of the same name by Oleta Adams, 1993. Stand, or rather sit corrected. As far as I can tell, she absolutely is talking about humankind and the way that we have set ourselves apart through our sentience and our technology and the accumulated understanding we are able to pass down from generation to generation through language, through technology, through our society and cultural shared knowledge. But of course, that comes with perils, because once we start inventing things like rockets, which can go up to the planets and explore, which can make us capable of understanding the comets which are in the sky, we can also, of course, send missiles around the planet to blow up other human communities and societies. And so we become the only species thus far capable of entirely creating our own extinction, whereas the tyrannosaur and other species in the past were subject to external pressures and like species level selection processes and ultimately environmental catastrophes like the KT extinction event. So yes, it feels like she's very much talking about the evolution of humanity, but also declaring it to be a state of mind, meaning we can't just evolve as we have genetically and physiologically, we also have to evolve mentally and emotionally, and perhaps only if we can do that can we avoid the fate of walking in the footsteps of those species who have gone the way of the dodo, to borrow phrases from different places, the police, bad religion, otherwise. Nevertheless, yes, it does sound like she's talking about how we've lined the halls of science with dinosaur fossils and now extinct hominid species and so on, and we study them and we marvel at the long millennia and indeed millions of years that have led us into the modern world, but we are of course capable of snuffing that all out in an instant through our destructive capabilities and through the very intelligence that does afford us a level of planetary control and habitability that was, not even a glint in the eye of hominid species going back before Homo sapiens. So, yeah, it was a surprisingly scientific song, but I think she, again, is talking about emotions and emotional maturity and perhaps a species level maturity that we still don't have. Carl Sagan often talks about how, and even if this was like 40 years ago when he was saying this, 50 years ago, we're still essentially in the same moment on a Earth scale or timeline that we're in technological adolescence. We've developed great powers and abilities, but we're still subject to xenophobia and territoriality and prejudice and a propensity to violence, all of which makes our control of such technologies dangerous and perilous, not just for us, but all other species on this planet. So, yeah, I'm actually surprised that the subject matter of the song was more in the line of evolution through natural selection and also technological evolution, but of course speaking to the perils and the ability of us to become the tyrannosaur fossils in museums. So yeah, really interesting one. Maybe I'm not reading all the lines there clearly after a first listen, but yes, it sounds like she's talking about humanity as a whole and this unique situation we find ourselves in where we have, again, set ourselves a part of nature despite having come from nature and being capable of wiping out all nature, even if theoretically that's not the goal of any human societies. So yeah, a really interesting song. Sonically, like a bit less jazzy than some others. I suppose R&B meets soul a little bit, maybe more soul than R&B, but sort of in that Venn diagram. But I almost allowed the sonics and maybe even her vocals a little bit to take a back seat as I was really trying to follow the lyrics. So that's always an indication when a song is well and interestingly written. So yeah, that was a really cool one and one that was a bit unexpected. And I enjoy that that's the title track of the album, though fair to say, and like I mentioned in my intro, I think a lot of her songs do lend themselves to the idea of being emotionally conflicted or having to adjust or adapt to a relationship that perhaps hasn't played out exactly as you thought, but which is still worth salvaging. So I think metaphorically the concept applies to the album as a whole and to other songs on it, but here it actually was used in a more literal and scientific manner than I expected. So a really cool one. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.